I'm Romina Massa, and this is Off on a Tangent, stories from the hidden side of the spectrum. Every episode starts with something that happened. Some stories are loud, some are quiet. All of them are mine. Most take place before I knew I was autistic, some after. Either way, they're true. This episode is episode 1, the diagnosis. And so it starts with me getting the report from the neuropsychologist who officially diagnosed me with autism level 2 and 2 comorbidities that I will not share because it's just not the right time. In that moment, for me, I was alone, I was at home, I was finding this out. This was something that we already suspected, but now it was true for the first time. And I had to really kind of sit with it and figure out, okay, so now things make sense, right? Like even the jokes, when my therapist recommended that I get tested, and then we'd be like, oh yeah, that's so autistic of me. Like, yeah, I should get tested. Like, it does sound like I could be on the spectrum. Even all of those things, suddenly they made sense. And we knew for sure. And so that was an interesting moment for me. Reading the diagnosis, it was especially interesting for me to find out that I was level 2, which officially means that I need some support. And to find that out at 41 and say, wow, I've needed support for a long time. No wonder I'm tired. No wonder I'm sick, because I was sick and we didn't know what was wrong with me. And so that's a little bit where I went first, right? So this explained I had been sick for a couple of years, but a lot of things had happened to me. I had finished a relationship of 9 years where I had been gaslit, lied to, cheated on, and completely just mistreated. But, that's a story for a different podcast. And I had also got hit with perimenopause that for the longest time I didn't know. So I had been getting sick since I hit 40. But even after all of those things passed, and even after the perimenopause was diagnosed, I was still not okay. I was still getting sick. And the autism diagnosis kind of explained why. And that's where my mind went at first. But after that, it went to the things that my therapist and I were discussing as the signs of what made her even recommend that I get tested. And the signals that she had noticed that, included things that now we know had a name. So, for example, we knew that I was reading when I graduated kindergarten because I had hyperlexia. And we found out that if I had been reading at kindergarten today, at that age in 2025, I would have gotten tested right then and there. But in 1980, whatever, when I was in kindergarten, what did my parents know? They didn't know that was hyperlexia. They didn't know that my reading at that age showed that I could be on the spectrum. And so that that marks my life as so many unnoticed signals that started in kindergarten, if not earlier, who knows. And then I found out at 41. And so what happened to me, it reframed everything. To me, it made me, I was kind of warned to not let it reframe things, but I don't think that makes sense, because why shouldn't it? Why wouldn't it, when it finally gave me permission to be different, right? In order for me to understand the world, I needed to understand that I saw it differently than everybody else did. And so it wasn't so as I had been hearing my entire life. It wasn't that I was dramatic. It wasn't that I was too much. It wasn't that I was making a big deal out of it. It was just that I was seeing things differently when I was maybe becoming overwhelmed or becoming upset or maybe becoming triggered. And I'm not excusing moments in which I behaved in a way that I shouldn't have, but I am saying that it's okay to give myself grace for having been misunderstood so many times in my life, and realizing now that it wasn't because I was knowingly doing something wrong, but because I was unknowingly just misunderstanding the world around me. And that new lens did help me. And so it allowed me to say, well, what does that mean for me in real life? And for a moment there, I felt encouraged to say, okay, so I have autism. I need a certain level of support. That level of support is called an accommodation when you're somewhere like work. And so I'm allowed to ask for them, right? Technically, autism is a disability. So I'm supposed to even be checking that I have a disability in the forms. And that's, again, a topic for a whole different episode because, like, do I not? Being in the job search and having a non visible disability is a whole different story. But here we go, off on a tangent. I just realized that I was struggling at work, but that now I had an explanation for why. I knew why I was struggling because this diagnosis helped me understand certain things that I couldn't before. And so I realized that I just didn't understand what my leadership wanted. They were giving me verbal instructions and I didn't understand. They were sharing their expectations during meetings, and I was missing social cues. I was misreading their facial expressions. I was exhibiting symptoms that I didn't know before that I had. And so I felt encouraged to ask for accommodations and to say, hey, I have a certain diagnosis, a new diagnosis, and I'm going to jump through all the hoops and I'm going to disclose and I'm going to ask for help and for support. And so that is what I did. And trust me, many people today tell me that was a mistake. Some of you gasped as you heard, and you were like, "No, she didn't." Yes, I did. I disclosed, and I did it in writing. And so I went to the neuropsychologist, and I asked her to please send a letter in, that confirmed her diagnosis of me. And then I sent that letter with a written letter of myself disclosing my diagnosis and asking exactly for what I needed. And it was a very specific letter with bullet points of what I was asking for. And what I was asking for, y'all, was not crazy. I was asking for written instructions. I was asking for scheduled calls instead of like impromptu calls. And I'm not saying like forever and ever, right? Like, I mean, I understand that if the chief marketing officer wants to talk to you, you kind of pick up the phone. But I also think that structure is important and that people in general deserve some respect for their time and space. And I personally find it so triggering to be in calls that are not on my schedule at work. And so I was asking for that as an accommodation. But really, the main accommodation was written instructions, no lie. And the letter was written and rewritten several times. Sometimes it was edited because it was too long. Sometimes it was too emotional. Sometimes it asked for too much. Sometimes it asked for too little. But eventually, I sent it, and it was received terribly. So I sent the letter asking for accommodations, and from the beginning, the experience was terrifying. The first thing I hear is nothing for like 1 2 weeks. And so I'm freaking out because I'm not hearing anything from HR. I'm not hearing anything from anybody. And I'm thinking I just made the biggest mistake of my professional career. And then out of nowhere, I get an email from a person from legal copying my boss telling me that the process had been started for me to receive accommodations. At this point, I didn't even know if they were allowed to disclose to my boss before I told them that it was okay to disclose to my boss that I had asked for accommodations. But anyway, that's what happened. And I was so terrified. And from then on, the process of getting accommodations was terrible. And I never got them. My boss literally said that my request for written instructions was not approved. And she said that I just needed to read between the lines and I needed to understand the instructions as given to me verbally. And so I just didn't know what to say. And I remember telling her that it was like asking me to run up the stairs without a wheelchair. But she didn't like it when I said that. And she told me that I needed to get with the program and that this was what the position required and that it was not going to serve me to continue expressing myself in those terms, and to stop asking for written instructions and to stop asking for written feedback. And I remember after that, I sent one more email, not asking her for written feedback, but asking the her boss for written feedback. And immediately after sending that email, I get an email from her, my boss, telling me that we had a meeting the next day in the morning. And I actually didn't see it coming. I really, really didn't see it coming. And so I show up to this meeting on a Friday at 9 a.m. and I can see that the meeting has started already. That like there are people in the room early. And so I'm texting my boss and I'm like, hey, do you need me to jump in early? I see that you're in there, and she's not answering. So I jump in right at the beginning and I immediately notice that my boss is not alone and there's someone else. And that's when it hits me. It's HR. And so my boss, this she doesn't even look at me, and she proceeds to just read out from a paper and let me know that my role hasn't been eliminated, and that I have been laid off effective immediately, and basically I don't have a job anymore, and I'm gonna get a couple months severance, and this is blah 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 blah, and then she leaves. It was so short, so impersonal. She just left, and I never heard from her again. And then I was left with HR, and I was in shock, and I really did kind of let it show, and HR felt my pain, and I told them everything. I told them my entire story of how I didn't even think it was legal to be laid off in the middle of a process of accommodations, and was it even legal for them to deny me the accommodation of written instructions and like not approve it, and was it even legal in the middle of the process for them to just take my livelihood away from me. But she said there was, yeah. And I could fight it, but if I, had any issues, I of course couldn't get the severance. And if I didn't get the severance, I didn't survive. I'm a single mom, and I have a home that of course I bought 7 months before I got laid off. I bought my first house. So that was tough landing. And I'm explaining to the HR lady that I don't think this is fair at all. And I was crying, but the HR lady didn't really much care, I would say. I mean, and she acted like she cared, but it wasn't something that she said anything other than you either sign the severance or you don't, and these are the legal terms. And so we hung up, and there, the days that followed were a haze of many things. I didn't tell people for a while that I lost my job. I only told a few select people. I went in a panic and applied to so many jobs. I reached out to anybody that I could. I did my very best not to be paralyzed. I was terrified. Um, I didn't want to tell my dad because I didn't want, I knew he was going to be so worried. And I eventually did tell him, but he has since unexpectedly passed away. And I wish I had told him sooner, because he was so supportive once he did find out. But either way, I didn't tell. a lot of people, and I was, terrified, and I didn't know what to do. And I looked into discrimination and my rights, and I couldn't get help from any lawyers, and no lawyers would answer me. And I tried nonprofits, and I tried so many things, and really came up short on everything, and ended up um, feeling in a position where I needed to accept that severance and move on with my life. And so that's what I did, and just trust that I would get a new job. And so that's what I did. And so that was in November of 2024. Today it's July 2025, and I have not yet been hired. And a lot of things have happened since, and I've had to pivot many times. And this podcast is part of that pivot, building something for myself. And I'm telling my story as a way to build something for myself. And that is part of what happened to me, was that I chose visibility, right? I in a way, I got erased out of the face of the earth with that company. I mean, it's not a plot twist to tell you that I signed the severance, took the money, and that means I can't tell you any details, right? I'm legally not allowed to tell you any more details about this. And but there are certain things that I can share. I can share the story. And so I did start, upon losing my job, not just applying to positions, but also trying to build a personal brand, and trying to build my own business, and trying to get some freelance clients, and trying to get some dual sides of income until I got rehired, especially because with the brutal job market right now, it's been really hard. And as you can see, 7.5 months in, still no dice. And it started going really well for me on LinkedIn, and people were interested in my content as soon as I started being real. And I started being real in like the professional things, right? Like at the beginning at job interviews, I wouldn't show up with my blue hair, and things like that. And so I decided to show a little bit of myself a little bit more, but I was still keeping my diagnosis from people, and that was still keeping the fact that I'm neurodivergent from a lot of people in my personal life, and definitely from my professional and from my public life, especially after losing my job so violently, after having disclosed. But during a session with my therapist, again, shout out to Christina, best therapist in the world, um, we realized one day in April that the only part of my story that I wasn't sharing was that, my diagnosis. And was that affecting anything? Was I really showing up as myself to the audience that was growing and seemingly engaging with me and caring about what I had to say? Was I really being authentic and genuine if I wasn't telling my whole story? And it was a little bit of a fuck that, right? Like, screw it. Let me share it all. And it just so happened to be April, and April just so happens to be Autism Awareness Month. And so I was like, hey, why not? Let's bring awareness and also be a little bit cliche and do this on Autism Awareness Month. And so I made a post, and I explained why there's an octopus next to my name. And it's a nod to autism because the octopus is kind of like an unofficial symbol. And then I made another post where I shared the story of my layoff. And then I made another post. And one day I wake up, and in the middle of the night, overnight, I had gone stratospherically mega viral with the one post about my layoff story, which had like no photo, no nothing. It was just text. But apparently abroad, it resonated more than anything. And it was like over 500,000 impressions overnight, crazy visibility, and definitely what they call the halo effect, kind of a rise in the visibility of the rest of my content. And while still no full job, and not a full roster of clients, it did unlock opportunities for me in a way that hadn't been happening before. And I am final candidate at a couple of jobs, and I did get a couple of work opportunities, and I have landed a couple of freelance clients. And so the visibility did help me um, build a little bit farther. And what resonates the most, right, is that it came with the truth. It came with being real. And there has not been a single hater yet that has been negative about me coming out with my diagnosis. And like, how wonderful is that? And so, I've started a process of unmasking in my life. And this podcast is part of that. I am setting all kinds of boundaries in my life personally to protect my peace, professionally to protect my peace, publicly to protect my peace. And at the same time, I'm starting to open up fully and really telling my story and doing it like this, one episode at a time, one incident at a time. And that was it. This is the story of how I found out I'm autistic. And I'm very, very happy that I shared it. And if anybody ever feels encouraged to share their own, I'm here to listen. Thank you for listening to this. Subscribe, let me know what you think, and thank you.